I still remember that night as if it's carved into my skin, quiet, heavy, and full of something I couldn't name. The air felt different, almost as if it knew something I didn't. I was sitting by the window, scrolling aimlessly through my phone, when a message appeared, just one line that made my whole body go cold. There's something you deserve to know about your family. At first, I laughed. Who would send something like that? But the longer I stared at those words, the more uneasy I felt. My chest tightened. My mind raced back through the years, every smile, every bedtime story, every I love you from the woman I called Mom. Suddenly, pieces that never quite fit started to move, reshaping into something darker, something I wasn't ready for. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat there, shaking, staring at old family photos, searching for something, a clue, a lie, a truth. I didn't know it then, but my life was about to split into two, before that night and after it. Because the woman who had raised me, loved me, and called me her daughter, wasn't who I thought she was. If you had asked me a few years ago what a perfect childhood looked like, I would have said mine. Our house wasn't big or fancy. It was small, with cracked walls and a garden that barely grew anything except a stubborn rose bush my mother refused to give up on. Every morning, she'd open the kitchen window, let the light in, and hum the same tune while making tea. That sound, her voice mixed with the whistle of the kettle, was my alarm clock for years. My mother, the only one I knew, had a calm strength about her. She was never the loud or strict type. Her love didn't need big words or gestures. It was in the way she brushed my hair before school, the way she held my face when I cried, or the way she always saved the last piece of bread for me no matter how hungry she was. She wasn't rich, but she made our world feel full. We didn't have much, but I never felt poor. Our happiness came from simple things, movie nights with popcorn burned around the edges, dancing barefoot in the rain, and sitting on the porch talking about dreams that seemed so far away. I'd tell her I wanted to travel the world, and she'd smile and say, "Then you will, sweetheart. You already have the wings. You just need to find the wind." That was my mom, always believing in me, even when I didn't believe in myself. I never questioned why we didn't have family photos beyond just the two of us, or why no one ever visited on birthdays. She'd always say, "It's just us, my girl, and that's more than enough." And for a long time it was. I didn't need anyone else. Her love was enough to fill every empty space. She worked long hours as a nurse, often coming home late, her hands smelling faintly of disinfectant and soap. But no matter how tired she was, she always found time for me. Some nights, she'd sit by my bed, telling stories about the patients she helped, stories that weren't sad but full of compassion and hope. She'd say, "When you take care of people, you learn what love really means." And I believed her. She was my whole world, my anchor, my teacher, my best friend. There was never a day I doubted her love, never a moment I felt unwanted. She had this way of making me believe that everything in my life happened for a reason, that I was exactly where I was meant to be. Looking back now, it almost feels like she was building a shield around me, protecting me from a truth too heavy for a child to carry. But I didn't see it then. All I saw was a mother who loved me beyond measure. If I had known how fragile that perfect world really was, maybe I would have held her a little tighter. It didn't happen all at once. The truth never does. It creeps in quietly, in the pauses between conversations, in the silences that don't make sense. Looking back, I can see the cracks now. But at the time, they were just small, passing moments I brushed aside. It started when I was about 15. I was working on a family tree project for school, and I asked my mom for details about our relatives' grandparents, cousins, where they lived. She froze for just a second before smiling and saying, "Oh, honey, most of them live far away. We're not really in touch anymore." Her tone was light, but her eyes told a different story, a flicker of something like fear. I didn't question it then. She had never lied to me before. Why would she start now? As the years went by, more things didn't add up, like the way she avoided cameras. Every time someone tried to take a family photo, she'd step aside, saying she looked a mess. Or how she'd change the subject when I asked about my baby pictures. There were only a few, all from when I was already a toddler. None from the day I was born. Once, while cleaning the closet, I found an old envelope with documents, my birth certificate, vaccination papers, and something else tucked beneath them. A hospital wristband. It had my first name right, but the last name was different. I remember staring at it for a long time, feeling something twist inside me. When I asked her about it later, she simply said, "It must be a printing mistake," and took it from my hands so quickly it almost felt rehearsed. I wanted to believe her, and I did, for a while. But as I got older, I started noticing the little inconsistencies in her stories. She'd tell me about the night I was born, how she held me first, but the details changed every time. Once she said it was raining that night, another time it was snowing. Sometimes the hospital had blue walls, sometimes green. Tiny differences, but enough to make me pause. Then there were her nightmares. I'd wake up at night and hear her whispering in her sleep, saying things like, "I had no choice," or "Please forgive me." When I'd ask in the morning, she'd laugh it off and say she didn't remember. I told myself I was overthinking, that every family had its secrets, but the unease never went away. It followed me like a shadow, quiet, patient, waiting for the right moment to speak. There was love between us, yes. So much love. But there was also something else now, a distance I couldn't name. Sometimes I'd catch her staring at me when she thought I wasn't looking, like she was memorizing my face, afraid I might disappear. I didn't know then that she was the one afraid of disappearing. I didn't know that the truth was already there, sitting quietly in the room with us, waiting to be found. It was a chilly winter morning when the call came, one of those mornings where the world feels still but you just know something is about to change. I was sitting at my kitchen table, nursing a cup of lukewarm coffee, scrolling through my emails and messages, when the phone rang. The number wasn't familiar. Usually, I ignored unknown numbers, but something in my gut told me to answer. "Hello," I said, trying to sound normal. "Hi, are you my full name?" The voice was soft, hesitant, almost trembling. "Yes," I replied, feeling a little suspicious. "Who's this?" There was a pause. I could hear her swallowing, the faint hum of a heater in the background, maybe even a clock ticking somewhere. I think you need to know something about your family. Something important. I don't know if you've ever been told, but you might not know the truth about who you are." At first, I laughed. It had to be a prank. My mother had raised me. I had my whole life, my memories, my childhood, my family. What could this stranger possibly tell me that would matter? But the laughter died in my throat. There was something in her voice, urgency, fear, and an almost desperate hope that I would listen. My heart started racing. She told me my full name, the one I had used my whole life, and then she whispered another name. My real name. A name I had never heard before. My chest tightened, and I felt my hands go cold. I don't understand," I stammered. "What are you talking about?" "You were adopted," she said simply. No preamble, no softening the blow. You were placed with your mother, the woman who raised you, because your birth mother couldn't take care of you. I can help you find her if you want, but you deserve to know." Everything blurred. My coffee cup, the sunlight spilling through the kitchen window, the hum of the refrigerator. It all became distant white noise. My mind raced back through the years, the stories my mother had told me, the lullabies she had sung, the way she had kissed my scraped knees and whispered promises I thought were eternal. I felt anger, confusion, betrayal, and fear all at once. Was this real? Had my whole life been a lie? How could someone who had loved me so deeply not be my real mother? I need time," I managed to say, my voice shaking. The woman on the other end of the line was patient, telling me she would wait, that I could reach out when I was ready. But I didn't feel ready. I didn't feel anything except the cold, hollow pit in my stomach that tells you life as you know it has shifted forever. That night, I went home and confronted my mother. I asked her gently at first, then desperately, "Mom, is there something you're not telling me?" She looked at me, her hands trembling, and for the first time in my life, I saw fear in her eyes. It was the look of someone carrying a secret too heavy to hold any longer. And at that moment, I realized my life, the life I thought I knew so well, was about to be rewritten forever. After that phone call, everything changed, but nothing happened immediately. That night, I returned home carrying a storm inside me, my thoughts spinning faster than I could follow. I wanted answers, I wanted the truth, but I also feared it. I wasn't sure I was ready to hear it, even though my gut told me I had to. I walked in and found her sitting at the kitchen table, as if she had been waiting. The soft light above her head cast shadows across her face, making her look older, wearier than I'd ever noticed. She had always been my anchor, my safe place, but tonight, she seemed fragile, human in a way I had never allowed myself to see. I sat down, unsure how to begin. The words caught in my throat. She looked at me, eyes full of something I couldn't name, regret, sorrow, fear. I finally whispered, "Mom, is it true? About what I just heard?" She didn't speak immediately. The silence stretched between us, thick and heavy, filled with every unspoken word of my life. My stomach churned. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. I wanted her to speak, to say something, anything, but the quiet answer itself felt like a confession. Finally, she exhaled slowly and began. "I wanted to tell you. I just didn't know how. I was afraid it would change the way you felt about me." Her voice trembled, small and fragile, but full of honesty. "You're not my biological daughter. I didn't give birth to you, but I raised you, loved you, and I always will. I took you in because you had no one, and I promised myself I'd give you everything you deserved." The words hit me like a wave. I felt a mixture of relief and disbelief. Relief that I wasn't imagining things, that the phone call hadn't been a mistake. Disbelief because everything I thought I knew about my life, about my identity, was suddenly shifting beneath me. She reached for my hand, and I felt the warmth, the years of love that hadn't changed, even though the truth had. "I know this is hard," she whispered, "and I know it doesn't make sense right now. I just need you to know it doesn't change us. Not really." I sat there, gripping her hand, trying to process it all. Memories of my childhood, bedtime stories, scraped knees, laughter over burnt pancakes, rushed back, now tinged with a new perspective. They were real. Every hug, every kiss, every sleepless night she spent caring for me, those were all real. Love didn't need biology. And yet a new question emerged in my mind, sharper than anything before. Who was my real mother? What had happened to her? Why couldn't she raise me? The silence between my adoptive mother's words and the unspoken details created a space in my heart that demanded answers. That night, I realized the truth wasn't just a revelation. It was a journey. The silence had answered the biggest question, that she wasn't my birth mother, but it had opened the door to 1,000 more. And even though I was scared of what I might find, I knew I had to walk through that door, because the truth was no longer something I could avoid. The woman who had loved me, nurtured me, and shaped my life had spoken at last. And now, I had to find the courage to discover the rest of my story. That night, after the silence finally broke, my mother sat me down and began to tell me a story I had never known, a story I wasn't sure I was ready to hear, but one that I needed more than anything. "I want you to understand why I did what I did," she said softly, her hands wringing in her lap. "You see, you weren't supposed to come to me. You were meant for someone else, someone who couldn't be there for you at the time." She told me about my birth mother, a young woman, scared and alone, barely old enough to take care of herself, let alone a newborn. My real mother had been in a situation that forced her to make a decision no parent should ever have to make. The hospital had found me abandoned, crying, and she had signed the papers that placed me into someone else's care, into the arms of the woman I had always called Mom. I remember feeling a strange mix of emotions, anger at the circumstances, pity for a mother I had never met, confusion over why I had never been told. But most of all, I felt a strange relief. At least now, there was an explanation for the little cracks I had noticed growing up. The gaps in stories, the missing photos, the moments she seemed afraid to speak. My adoptive mother's voice grew steadier as she spoke. I saw you that day, and I couldn't walk away. You were so small, so helpless. And I didn't have children of my own. I couldn't leave you to a world that might not care. So I brought you home, and I raised you. Everything you know, everything you are, I tried to give you the life you deserved, even if it wasn't the one fate had intended for you. Tears blurred my vision as I listened. I thought about all the birthdays, the nights she stayed awake when I was sick, the way she had comforted me when the world felt too big. Every hug, every whispered encouragement, every sleepless night suddenly took on a new meaning, not as a replacement for my birth mother, but as proof of a love that had chosen me in the most deliberate, selfless way possible. And yet, my mind couldn't stop asking questions. Who was my real mother now? Did she think of me? Did she regret her decision? My adoptive mother answered as much as she could, giving me pieces of the puzzle without ever diminishing her own role in my life. She explained that my birth mother had been young, scared, and unprepared, but that she had loved me from afar. She had made the hardest choice a parent can make, a choice to ensure my survival and happiness, even if it meant letting me go. That night, I realized that love can exist in more than one form. It doesn't always come from the person who gives you life. Sometimes, it comes from the person who chooses to stay, who chooses to nurture you, who chooses to be there every day, in ways that matter far more than blood. For the first time, I understood the truth. My life had always been filled with love, even if it came in forms I hadn't yet recognized. And even though I had never known the full story until now, that love had been enough to make me who I was. It wasn't the story I expected to hear. It was better. I spent nights lying awake, staring at the ceiling, imagining both women's faces, trying to reconcile them in my mind. My adoptive mother's hands, calloused yet gentle, the scent of her perfume on my pillow. My birth mother's image, blurry yet profound, a face I had never truly known but somehow already felt connected to. Anger crept in too. Anger at life for putting me in the middle of a story I didn't choose, at fate for making love and truth so complicated. At times, I wanted to run from it all, to retreat into the safety of ignorance. But the storm wouldn't let me. It demanded attention, demanded reckoning. And yet, amidst the turbulence, there was also a strange clarity. I realized that I had two sources of love, two women whose choices had shaped me in different ways. One had given me life, the other had given me living. One was my origin, the other my home. And while the emotions were overwhelming, they were also a gift, a reminder that love can be layered, imperfect, messy, and still profoundly real. The storm inside me wasn't going away anytime soon. But I knew I had to face it, to navigate its winds and currents. Because within that chaos lay the truth about who I really was and the possibility of understanding the full measure of love that had carried me through my life. For the first time, I realized that identity isn't just about birth or blood. It's about the love, choices, and sacrifices that shape us, and I was blessed to have both. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of urgency I couldn't ignore. The phone call had opened a door I couldn't close, and now I needed answers, not just about who I was, but about the woman who had given me life. My birth mother, the one I had never met. I didn't know where to start. My adoptive mother had given me pieces, a name, a vague location, and a few documents. It wasn't much, but it was enough to begin the search. I started quietly, scouring public records, adoption files, and online databases. Every piece of information felt like a key, unlocking a part of the story I had been denied for so long. I contacted distant relatives, neighbors, anyone who might have known her. Each conversation added a fragment, a birthday, a school, a hospital. Every lead felt like a lifeline, a thread connecting me to a woman I had never seen but somehow already felt I knew. At first, hope and fear wrestled inside me. What if I found her, and she didn't want to meet me? What if she had moved on, or worse, forgotten me entirely? And yet, the fear was always accompanied by a stronger impulse. I had to know. I had to see her face, hear her voice, and understand the choices she had made. The more I uncovered, the more vivid her life became in my mind. She had been just 19 when she had me, scared and alone, without family to lean on. She had made a decision that no parent should have to make, a decision that broke her heart but ensured I would survive. I thought about the courage it must have taken to let me go, to walk away from the one thing she had created with everything she had, knowing she might never hold me again. As I pieced together her story, I realized that my anger, confusion, and fear were all intertwined with admiration. She had acted out of love, even if it had been from a distance. She had given me a chance at life, knowing that someone else would raise me in safety, in warmth, in love. Finally, after weeks of searching, I found her. A small address, just a town away, tucked between the lines of old documents. My hands shook as I held the paper. I wasn't sure whether I was excited or terrified. This was it. This was the moment that would change everything. I told myself to be calm, to breathe, but my heart raced as I imagined opening that door. Would she recognize me? Would she want to meet me? Could I handle the flood of emotions I was about to unleash, mine and hers? I knew one thing for certain. I had to try. I had to face the unknown, even if it scared me beyond words. Because the story of my life was incomplete without her. And now, after so many years, the chapter that had been missing was finally within reach. The search had taken me to the edge of fear and hope, and standing there, holding the address in my hands, I realized I was ready to meet her. The woman who gave me life, the one whose courage and sacrifice had shaped me long before I even knew her name. The day I finally met her, I felt a mix of anticipation and terror that I can't put into words. My hands were shaking, my stomach tied in knots, and my heart felt as if it might leap out of my chest. I had imagined this moment 1,000 times, what she would look like, how she would speak, whether she would smile or cry. But nothing could have prepared me for the reality of standing on her doorstep. I took a deep breath and knocked. The door opened slowly, and there she was, my birth mother. She froze for a moment, as if she wasn't sure what to do with a stranger standing on her porch. And then our eyes met. I don't know who moved first, but we were suddenly in each other's arms, holding tight, as if we had both been waiting for this moment for our entire lives. She whispered my name, the name I had never known until recently, and the sound of it from her lips sent shivers down my spine. Tears streamed down both our faces, silent and unstoppable. I could feel the weight of years, of choices, of fear and love, pouring into that embrace. It was overwhelming, confusing, and yet strangely comforting. We sat down together after what felt like an eternity of clinging to one another. She told me about the day I was born, about the fear she had felt, the hopelessness, and the heartbreak of signing the papers that placed me with my adoptive mother. She told me that she had always thought of me, prayed for me, and hoped that wherever I was safe and loved. I listened, barely able to breathe. Her voice, filled with quiet regret and longing, painted a picture of a woman who had made the hardest decision a mother could make. And though I felt anger and sadness, natural, inevitable, there was also a deep, undeniable admiration. She had loved me in her own way, from a distance, making sacrifices I could hardly imagine. We spent hours talking, sharing stories I had never known and filling in gaps in both our lives. She laughed at some of my childhood memories, the same memories I had shared with my adoptive mother, and I realized how intertwined our lives had been in ways I had never understood. She cried at others, confessing her guilt, her sorrow, and her endless hope that I had been happy, even without her. By the end of the day, I felt a strange sense of completion. Not because everything was perfect, or because every question had been answered, but because the truth was finally there, raw, human, and real. I had found the missing piece of myself, and in that discovery, I felt stronger, more whole. Walking away that evening, I knew our relationship would take time to build, and that there would be moments of confusion, sadness, and joy. But I also knew that love, even the complicated, messy kind, had brought us together. And for the first time in my life, I felt the fullness of a story that was finally mine. Even after meeting my birth mother, I quickly realized that healing isn't simple. Life doesn't suddenly make sense just because you've uncovered the truth. There were moments of joy, certainly, but there were also moments of pain, confusion, and guilt that I hadn't expected. Returning home from that first meeting, I sat in my room, replaying every second of the encounter. My emotions were a chaotic swirl. I felt happiness at finally meeting the woman who had given me life. I felt sadness for the years we had lost, for the milestones she had missed, and the memories we would never share. And I felt a deep, unshakable guilt for having so much love from my adoptive mother while knowing that my birth mother had carried me in her heart for all those years without being able to hold me. Even my adoptive mother, the woman who had raised me with unwavering love and devotion, was affected. She was afraid I would drift away, that I would favor the woman who had given me life over the woman who had given me everything else. Her worry was visible in small gestures, in the way she hesitated before speaking, the careful tone of her questions, the subtle sadness when she smiled at me. I could feel her pain, and it made me question everything. Reconciliation didn't come in a single conversation. It came slowly in fragments. There were phone calls, text messages, and visits. Each interaction required patience, compassion, and a willingness to see beyond my own emotions. I had to learn that love isn't zero-sum, that cherishing one person doesn't mean letting go of another. My two mothers had shaped my life in different ways, and both had loved me fiercely. Recognizing that didn't erase the storm inside me, but it began to calm it. There were days when grief would suddenly return, uninvited. A song on the radio, a childhood memory, a random thought. Anything could trigger it. Tears would come, often when I least expected them. And yet, I also learned that tears weren't a sign of weakness. They were a sign that my heart was trying to adjust to the new truth. Healing also required confronting difficult questions. Could I forgive my birth mother for not being able to raise me? Could I forgive myself for feeling anger, even momentarily? Could I forgive life for being so complicated? Slowly, I discovered that forgiveness wasn't about excusing the past. It was about freeing myself from being trapped in it. In the end, healing didn't mean everything became perfect. It meant learning to live with the complexity, to accept the imperfect love of two mothers, and to embrace the full story of who I was. It meant finding peace not in forgetting, but in understanding, not in replacing one truth with another, but in holding both truths at once. And as the months passed, I realized that the love I had always taken for granted from both women was enough to carry me through. It was messy, complicated, and human, but it was real. After months of searching, meeting, and understanding, I finally reached a place where I could breathe again, a place where I could begin to define myself on my own terms. Choosing my truth wasn't about picking one mother over the other, nor was it about erasing the past or pretending everything was simple. It was about embracing the full reality of my life, the messy, complicated, beautiful reality that had shaped me. I realized that identity isn't only about biology. It's about love, choices, and the people who show up for you day after day. My birth mother gave me life, yes, but she also made sacrifices so profound that they shaped my entire existence. She had let me go so that I could have a chance at a better life, a life full of safety, stability, and love. That choice alone spoke volumes about her courage, even if it was invisible to me for decades. And then there was my adoptive mother, the woman who raised me, who comforted me through scraped knees and heartbreaks, who celebrated my triumphs and grieved my failures as her own. She didn't just care for me. She became the person who taught me how to live, how to love, and how to believe in myself. Her love was constant, unwavering, and unconditional. For a long time, I felt torn, as if acknowledging one would somehow diminish the other. But I learned that love is not a limited resource. I could love both women fully, each in their own way, without guilt or fear. I could honor my birth mother for giving me life and my adoptive mother for giving me living. Both of them were pieces of who I am, and I couldn't be whole without recognizing each of their roles. Choosing my truth also meant accepting the complicated emotions that came with it. There were still moments of sadness, anger, or confusion. There were times when I questioned whether I truly belonged anywhere. But instead of fighting those feelings, I allowed myself to feel them, to examine them, and to grow from them. Healing, I realized, wasn't a straight path. It was a journey of self-discovery, acceptance, and forgiveness. And slowly, over time, I began to see the beauty in it all. My story wasn't perfect, but it was mine. Every secret, every sacrifice, every act of love had brought me to this moment, a moment where I could finally own my identity without shame or doubt. I was no longer a child hidden between two truths. I was a woman who could hold both realities, honor both mothers, and still stand tall on my own. Choosing my truth meant embracing the love I had received, recognizing the courage it took for both women to act as they did, and allowing myself to grow from the complexities of my past. It meant that my story, with all its pain, confusion, and eventual clarity, was a testament not only to survival but to the power of love, sacrifice, and understanding. And for the first time in my life, I felt complete. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real-life emotional stories. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a new video.